I never thought the day would come when I'd watch her walk away, smiling at someone else, while I stood frozen, invisible. MC1, it started like any ordinary Dior, so I thought. My wife, the woman I had quietly loved and secretly married for 3 years, was running around caring for someone else. Someone I had long suspected, but never dared confront her old crush. She moved through the day with that same calm composure, the kind that had drawn me to her years ago. And yet every step she took away from me felt like a small stab in my chest. I sat in the quiet of our apartment, staring at the anniversary card I had bought weeks ago. The thought of handing it to her felt surreal, almost meaningless. Would she even notice the date? Or would it slip past her, like so many other moments I had clung to in silence? My hands tightened around the card as a bitter laugh escaped me. 3 years. 3 years of secret smiles, stolen glances, and hollow words. MC2, when she finally remembered the anniversary, the date that mattered to me more than anything, it was too late. I had already taken the first step to end us. The divorce papers sat ready, each word a cold reflection of the love I had once believed in. I had drafted them myself, ensuring every clause would strip away the illusions I had built around us. Zoom in, close-up of the divorce papers on the desk. The irony was unbearable. She, a lawyer, trained to catch every detail, had never suspected a thing. I rehearsed what I would say if she questioned me, but deep down I knew her attention would be elsewhere. It always was. When she walked into the office where the papers waited, the first thing I noticed was her expression: sharp, perceptive, almond-shaped eyes that could cut through anyone's soul. SFX. Heartbeat. I froze, my breath catching. The woman I had adored silently, the one who had chosen to make me her secret, was now oblivious to my presence. And in that moment, I realized she never truly saw me. MC3, she glanced around, spotted the document on the desk, and picked up a pen without hesitation. For a brief moment, I imagined her reading it, realizing the truth, and finally looking at me, not just seeing me, but understanding. But it didn't happen. Her attention was elsewhere, drawn to a man who had just entered the office. The man she had loved long before I had existed in her life. Makoto. Quote, "Some loves are never ours to keep." The papers crumpled slightly in my hands as I watched her soft gaze meet his. My chest tightened, a mix of relief and heartbreak flooding through me. Relief that I would finally free myself from a one-sided love, and heartbreak because she would never look at me that way. I left the office silently, feeling the weight of our marriage lift, though my heart remained heavy with memory. MC4 back at the apartment. The memories of 3 years filled every corner, the laughter that never quite reached her eyes, the dinners where I pretended everything was fine, the nights spent hoping for warmth that never came. I stared at our wedding photo, her distant smile frozen in time. Without thinking, I took it down and tossed it into the trash. A symbolic gesture of the life we had never shared. MC5, and in that quiet I promised myself from today on I would let go of everything, every grievance, every false hope, every part of this marriage, including her. I never thought the day would go, the night was heavy. Precedon broke like a fragile promise, spilling golden light across the apartment. I picked up my phone almost automatically, eyes heavy, mind foggy from a night of unrest. A notification blinked at me WeChat moments. I hesitated before swiping, knowing that whatever I would see could shatter the fragile calm I had managed to cling to. MC10, the video that appeared made my chest tighten. It was Makoto, moving through the early morning crowd, sunlight catching the edges of his hair like a halo. People around him cheered quietly, captivated by the serenity he seemed to carry. And then I saw her, Willow, standing in the midst of it all. Her face was bathed in soft light, lips curling into a smile I had longed to see for years. SFX. Soft ambient music for a moment. I froze, unable to breathe. The sight of her, so peaceful, so completely unaware of the turmoil I felt, was almost unbearable. She had been the heart I chased, the reason I had tried so hard to bridge a gap that was never meant to close. And now, seeing her here, it became painfully clear she belonged to someone else. No, and she had always carried him in her heart. MC11, I felt a dull ache settle in my chest, a weight that seemed to pin me to the bed. Years of effort, hope, and quiet endurance, hold for nothing. I laughed quietly to myself, bitterly at the irony. I had believed that love could change her heart, that persistence could win her over. But the truth was cruel. I had been nothing more than a refuge, a temporary harbor from the storms of her true affections. I thought back to the night she had returned from helping him, drunk and vulnerable, and how I had tried to hide my feelings. How I had poured myself into my work, my home, my efforts to make her see me. Every smile she had given me had been polite, every warmth fleeting, and yet, despite all of that, I had clung to hope. But now, seeing her joy, the gentle way she interacted with him, I understood something I had refused to admit. I had loved her not for who she could be to me, but for the idea of further life I imagined we could have had together. MC-12, I rose from the bed, moving toward the window, staring out at the city slowly waking. The streets were alive with people, their routines indifferent to my private heartbreak. I felt strangely detached, like a spectator in my own life. And yet in the midst of this emptiness, a seed of resolve began to grow. It was time. Time to let go of the illusion I had clung to. Time to stop waiting for a miracle that would never come. I would honor what I had felt, acknowledge the pain, and finally step away not with bitterness, but with quiet acceptance. I knew that letting go would hurt. It always does. But the alternative, clinging to a love that had never truly been mine, was far worse. And as the sunlight touched my face, I made a silent promise to myself. I would reclaim my life, piece by piece. Starting with the acceptance of what had always been out of reach. Quote, love cannot be forced. It can only be released. MC-13, I turned away from the window, a strange calm settling over me, ready to face the day and the life that awaited beyond her shadow. The apartment was quiet, almost painfully so. Every object, every shadow seemed to echo the absence of her presence. I walked slowly through the rooms, letting my fingers brush against the furniture we had chosen together, the decorations we had argued over, the photographs we had taken, silent witnesses to a love that had never truly belonged to me. MC-14, I stopped in front of the bookshelf, my eyes catching on a photo of the two of us at some festival years ago. Her smile in that frame was radiant, carefree, but I knew now it had been a mask, a way to please me without ever truly opening her heart. My fingers traced the edges of the frame, a shiver running through me. How had I been so blind? SFX. Slow, somber piano. The clock ticked loudly, marking each second I had wasted on illusions. I remembered the countless nights lying awake beside her, imagining a future that had never existed. I had rehearsed conversations, imagined confessions, and dreamt of a love that was never mine to hold. Every hope, every plan, every longing, it had been one-sided. MC-15, I sank into the armchair, burying my face in my hands. The weight of disappointment pressed down on me like a storm I could not outrun. And yet, amidst the storm, a flicker of something new stirred a resolve, quiet and persistent, reminding me that I still had a life to reclaim. For 3 years, I had been a shadow in her world. I had played the husband, the companion, the devoted admirer, but never the one she truly wanted. And now, watching her happiness with him, Evan, from afar, I understood the final truth. Love is not about possession. It is about knowing when to let go. MC-16, I rose, walking toward the study where I had left the divorce papers. The document still lay there, a silent testament to my choice, to the moment I had decided to stop chasing what could never be mine. I picked it up, feeling the weight of finality in my hands. The pen beside it gleamed innocently, waiting to mark the conclusion of a chapter I had fought to hold open for far too long. A knock at the door startled me, and I turned quickly. It was just the mailman, handing over letters I had not yet collected. I nodded quietly, retreating back to the study, and laid the papers on the desk. My hand hovered over the pen, my heart beat loud in my ears. It was time to write the ending, to claim the closure I had denied myself for years. MC17, the thought of signing filled me with a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the love that could never bloom, relief that I would finally stop living in the shadow of someone else's heart. I exhaled slowly, steadying my trembling hand, and pressed the pen to the paper. The first stroke was heavy, deliberate. With each line, I felt the burden lift slightly, as if the act of acknowledging the truth was cleansing my soul. By the time the last word was written, I was left with a silence that was no longer painful, but peaceful. I placed the pen down, staring at the papers with a quiet reverence. This was not just a divorce, it was freedom. Freedom from longing, from illusions, from a love that had never been mine to keep. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go, not holding on. Quote, sometimes the bravest act is to walk away quietly. MC18, I left the study, walking past the memories that had once suffocated me. For the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of hope not for her, but for myself, and for the life I was finally free to live. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a pale glow over the apartment. I awoke with a strange sense of emptiness, not the crushing weight of despair, a hollow that carried the possibility of something new. My hands reached instinctively for my phone, expecting a message from her, a call. Anything but the silence was absolute. MC19, I got up and moved to the kitchen, the routine strangely comforting. The coffee machine hissed, filling the air with warmth and aroma. I poured myself a cup, the bitterness grounding me in the present. As I sipped, I thought about the years I had spent chasing a love that was never mine. How many mornings had I woken up beside her, hoping that today would be the day she would finally see me? And yet, she had always been elsewhere, her heart already belonging to someone else. Cut to B-roll. Sunlight on coffee cup, the house was silent, except for the faint sound of the city beyond the windows. I walked past the living room, my eyes catching the discarded wedding photo lying on the floor. I stared at it for a moment, feeling the sting of old memories, then turned away. That life, that illusion, was over. MC20, I decided to take a walk, needing fresh air to clear the lingering fog in my mind. Outside, the streets were bustling with people going about their lives, oblivious to the turmoil inside me. I felt like a ghost among them, invisible, yet strangely liberated. With each step, the weight on my chest lightened slightly. I realized that I had been holding on to her, not out of love, but out of fear of being alone. Fear of facing the truth. As I wandered, my mind drifted to her. I didn't hate her, how could I? She had simply been honest with her heart, something I had struggled to accept. But a part of me wanted to tell her how much I had loved her, how deeply I had cared, even if it was never reciprocated. And yet I knew that saying anything would change nothing. Sometimes silence is the only way to honor the truth. SFX. Soft wind returning home. I found myself drawn to the study once more. The divorce papers still lay on the desk, but now they seemed less like a burden and more like a bridge. I sat down, running my fingers over the smooth paper. Each word I had written was a step toward reclaiming myself, a reminder that my life was mine to shape. MC21, I pulled out a notebook, one I had long neglected. I began to write not about her, not about the past, but about myself, my dreams, my fears, and the life I wanted to live. The act of putting pen to paper felt cathartic, as if I were finally giving voice to the person I had suppressed for so long. Hours passed unnoticed. I wrote until my hand ached, until the sun had dipped low in the sky, painting the room in golden hues. And with every line I felt lighter, freer, more like the man I had always wanted to be. MC22, by evening, I set the notebook aside, feeling a profound sense of clarity. The past, with all its pain and longing, had taught me something invaluable, that true strength comes from within, and that the courage to let go can open the door to an entirely new life. Quote, freedom begins the moment you release what was never yours. I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker on, and allowed myself a small, tentative smile. For the first time in years, I was not defined by her, not bound by the memories of what could have been. I was simply Me, MC23. The next morning, I woke with a quiet determination. The emptiness I had felt before was gone, replaced by a fragile but growing sense of purpose. I didn't reach for my phone immediately. I didn't expect her messages, her calls, or even her attention. Today, I was focused solely on myself. MC24, I dressed quickly and left the apartment, the cool morning air invigorating me. Every step on the pavement felt deliberate, a small affirmation that I was moving forward. I decided to visit the little cafe I had always loved, the one tucked away on a quiet corner where no one knew my name. Cut to B-roll. Street cafe exterior. Inside, I ordered my usual black coffee, no sugar. I settled at a table by the window and watched people pass, observing life without needing to participate in anyone else's drama. And yet, even in this solitude, a thought gnawed at me. Had I been too patient, too passive for so many years? Could I have done more? Or was some love simply not meant to be? MC25, I reached into my bag and pulled out the notebook from last night. Flipping through the pages, I saw lines filled with raw honesty, emotions I hadn't dared voice to anyone. A smile tugged at my lips. This was the beginning of something. I realized, not just healing, but reclaiming the man I had buried under heartbreak and longing. As I sipped my coffee, a familiar face appeared outside the window. My heart skipped unexpectedly until I realized it wasn't her. Just a stranger, a reminder that life moved forward regardless of my inner turmoil. I breathed out slowly, letting the tension ease. Life would continue, with or without the closure I had once desperately sought. SFX. Soft exhale. Hours passed, and I found myself wandering through the streets. The city's rhythm strangely comforting. I passed a bookstore and decided to step inside. The scent of old pages, the quiet hum of soft conversations, all brought a sense of peace. I ran my fingers along the spines of novels, letting myself get lost in worlds that weren't mine, but that offered perspective, escape, and understanding. MC26. Eventually, I found a journal section. I picked up a small, leather-bound notebook, flipping it open and feeling its smooth pages beneath my fingers. I bought it, feeling that this was not just a purchase, but a symbolic gesture, a way to start documenting a life I was finally ready to claim. Back at the apartment, I placed the notebook on the desk alongside the divorce papers. The juxtaposition felt almost poetic. One represented the end, the other a new beginning. I sat down and began to write again, this time about my ambitions, my goals, and even small joys I had ignored while lost in love that wasn't returned. MC27. Evening fell, painting the room in deep amber. I leaned back in my chair and reflected on how far I had come. The journey wasn't easy. Heartbreak had left its mark, but I felt stronger, more resilient. For the first time, I understood that happiness wasn't something given. It was something I had to create piece by piece. Day by day, quote, "The strongest hearts are forged in the fires of letting go." As night settled, I closed the notebook and placed it carefully on the shelf. I felt an unexpected calm, a reassurance that the future was unwritten, and that I had the power to fill it with my own choices, not someone else's past. MC28. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, warming the apartment in a way that felt almost symbolic. I woke slowly, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside, realizing that for the first time in months, I wasn't consumed by anger or regret. Instead, there was a subtle but steady sense of control. I had survived heartbreak, and I was beginning to thrive in its aftermath. MC29. I brewed coffee, the aroma filling the kitchen. Even small routines, pouring milk, stirring slowly, savoring the first sip, felt grounding. It was as if the act of living deliberately, moment by moment, was a declaration of independence. Cut to Baral, pouring coffee, sunlight falling on cup. I remembered her face, the way her eyes had softened for him, how her attention had completely shifted toward someone else. I let out a bitter laugh. Was I really so desperate to be noticed that I had allowed myself to become invisible in my own marriage? The thought stung, but it also ignited clarity. MC30. I took out my phone and scrolled past the endless messages, ignoring the ones from friends asking how I was holding up, For once, I didn't feel the need to explain. I didn't know anyone the narrative of my pain. What mattered now was what I would choose for myself. Later, I decided to go for a walk along the river, the water reflecting the city lights as dusk approached. The world seemed calm, almost serene. And yet there was an undercurrent of life moving forward. People running, laughing, living. And I realized that I too could participate, not as a spectator, but as an active presence in my own story. MC31, I stopped at a small bench overlooking the water. Sitting there, I thought back to the years spent chasing her approval, trying to bridge a gap that never truly existed. How many nights had I lain awake, heart aching, hoping she would see me as I was? And yet, she had chosen him, someone she had loved long before I entered her life. I let that truth settle. Acceptance didn't sting as sharply. Now it felt liberating. Pulling out my notebook, I wrote freely. Goals, plans, ambitions. Even trivial dreams I had shelved in the name of love. Writing was no longer about grief. It was about envisioning a future untethered from someone else's decisions. SFX. Pen scratching QUOTE. Freedom begins when you stop waiting for someone else's love. Night fell completely, and I returned home. The city lights flickering outside like tiny beacons of possibility. For the first time, I considered my own happiness without guilt, without expectation, and without the weight of someone else's heart on my shoulders. I realized that the road ahead would be long and sometimes lonely, but it was mine to walk, and that thought filled me with quiet courage. MC32, before sleeping, I carefully placed the notebook beside my bed. It wasn't just paper, it was a testament to the life I was determined to build, one step at a time. And as I closed my eyes, I felt an unfamiliar but welcome peace settle in my chest, whispering that the next chapter, my chapter, was about to begin. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The apartment was quiet, almost eerily so, but I welcomed it. Silence no longer felt empty. It felt like space to think, to breathe, to rebuild. I dressed quickly, grabbed my bag, and stepped outside, the crisp air filling my lungs. Cut to B-roll. City streets, morning sunlight. People walking as I walked to the office. I noticed details I had never paid attention to before: the sound of a bicycle bell, the chatter of a cafe in the distance, the rhythm of my own footsteps. Life, it seemed, had been moving without me, and now I was finally stepping back into it. MC33 at work, I poured myself into tasks with renewed energy. Each project, each small success, reminded me that I was capable of more than just being defined by a relationship that had already ended. My colleagues noticed the change, the calm focus, the subtle confidence. It was almost as if they could sense that I had shed a heavy weight. During lunch, I sat alone on a park bench, watching couples pass by, hand in hand, laughing, completely unaware of the storms others might be enduring. I felt no bitterness, only reflection. How long had I been trying to force something that wasn't meant to be? And more importantly, how long had I denied myself the chance to truly live? MC34 by afternoon, I found myself wandering into a bookstore I hadn't visited in months. I lingered among the shelves, running my fingers over spines of books I had once loved, but never had time for. One particular book caught my eye, a memoir about someone who had reinvented their life after betrayal. I smiled, realizing that story could now be mine too. Cut to B-roll. Hand picking up a book, sunlight through window, returning home. I decided to tackle the apartment, sorting through papers, organizing closets, discarding remnants of the past. Each item I let go of felt like a symbolic act, clearing room not just physically, but emotionally. A stack of letters, forgotten trinkets, even the last photograph of her and me went into a box labeled Old Life. MC35 that night. I sat by the window, notebook in hand, and wrote freely about dreams I had postponed. Travel, learning, career goals, even personal challenges I wanted to conquer. Words flowed effortlessly, fueled by a mix of hope, determination, and the faint thrill of freedom. SFX, pen scratching QUOTE. Sometimes letting go is the only way to find yourself. I prepared for bed, I glanced at the notebook filled with plans and reflections. It wasn't just ink on paper, it was proof that I was stepping into my own story. One unshackled from the mistakes, heartbreaks, and unfulfilled expectations of the past. A quiet smile spread across my face as I finally felt the subtle, unspoken truth. My life was no longer on hold. MC36 with the city lights twinkling outside, I closed my eyes, feeling a calm certainty wash over me. Whatever tomorrow brought, I knew I would face it not as someone tethered to loss, but as someone finally free to shape their own destiny.
The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The apartment was quiet, almost eerily so, but I welcomed it. Silence no longer felt empty. It felt like space to think, to breathe, to rebuild. I dressed quickly, grabbed my bag, and stepped outside, the crisp air filling my lungs. Cut to Bayrol, city streets, morning sunlight, people walking. As I walked to the office, I noticed details I had never paid attention to before. The sound of a bicycle bell, the chatter of a cafe in the distance, the rhythm of my own footsteps. Life, it seemed, had been moving without me, and now I was finally stepping back into it. MC33. At work, I poured myself into tasks with renewed energy. Each project, each small success, reminded me that I was capable of more than just being defined by a relationship that had already ended. My colleagues noticed the change, the calm focus, the subtle confidence. It was almost as if they could sense that I had shed a heavy weight. During lunch, I sat alone on a park bench, watching couples pass by, hand in hand, laughing, completely unaware of the storms others might be enduring. I felt no bitterness, only reflection. How long had I been trying to force something that wasn't meant to be? And more importantly, how long had I denied myself the chance to truly live? Time of intimate fades. By afternoon, I found myself wandering into a bookstore I hadn't visited in months. I lingered among the shelves, running my fingers over spines of books I had once loved but never had time for. One particular book caught my eye, a memoir about someone who had reinvented their life after betrayal. I smiled, realizing that story could now be mine too. Cut to B-roll. Hand picking up a book, sunlight through window. Returning home, I decided to tackle the apartment, sorting through papers, organizing closets, discarding remnants of the past. Each item I let go of felt like a symbolic act, clearing room not just physically but emotionally. A stack of letters, forgotten trinkets, even the last photograph of her and me went into a box labeled Old Life. Stack of letters.
Wir suchen ein Flashhead Gather. A stack of last Swiss dogs.
That night, I sat by the window, notebook in hand, and wrote freely about dreams I had postponed. Travel, learning, career goals, even personal challenges I wanted to conquer. Words flowed effortlessly, fueled by a mix of hope, determination, and the faint thrill of freedom.
I'm Hedrick Misixi.
Quote, sometimes letting go is the only way to find yourself. As I prepared for bed, I glanced at the notebook filled with plans and reflections. It wasn't just ink on paper, it was proof that I was stepping into my own story, one unshackled from the mistakes, heartbreaks, and unfulfilled expectations of the past. A quiet smile spread across my face as I finally felt the subtle, unspoken truth. My life was no longer on hold.
Das dort im Bett, klimating is angekommen. Better Rishido attack auf den Tressfürstländer Eiffel feels different spexiger.
With the city lights twinkling outside, I closed my eyes, feeling a calm certainty wash over me. Whatever tomorrow brought, I knew I would face it, not as someone tethered to loss, but as someone finally free to shape their own destiny. The following morning, I woke with a strange mixture of anticipation and calm. There was no anxiety pressing against my chest, no lingering ache of longing. Instead, I felt a subtle energy humming beneath the surface, urging me to take steps I had avoided for far too long. Cut to B-roll. Sunrise over city skyline, steaming coffee cup. I decided to take a walk through the neighborhood, letting the cool breeze brush against my face. Each step felt lighter than the last. For the first time, I allowed myself to observe the small joys I had ignored, the scent of fresh bread from the bakery, the laughter of children chasing pigeons, the soft sway of trees along the avenue. It reminded me that life had not stopped, even when my heart had been frozen in place. Mix 37. By mid-morning, I found myself at the small park where I used to jog. The path was quiet, nearly empty, except for a few joggers and dog walkers. I paused, inhaling deeply, letting the sun warm my face. I realized that these were the moments I had missed, the simple, unremarkable slices of life that, when strung together, formed a life worth living. Could it be that the heartbreak had prepared me to notice them?
The slices, the wound wissens. Misgestappt, that's the thing.
Later, I returned to my apartment with renewed focus. I opened my laptop and began mapping out a project I had always dreamed of starting, a venture that combined my skills, passions, and long-postponed ideas. Each keystroke felt like a reclamation of time I had wasted, a declaration that I would no longer linger in the shadow of what once was. Cut to B-roll, hence typing, sunlight streaming through window. During the afternoon, a friend called unexpectedly. Their voice was cheerful, inquisitive, pulling me out of my solitary reflections. I shared my plans with them, and for the first time, I found myself genuinely excited about the future. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about reclaiming a life I had allowed to drift away. MC 39. As evening approached, I made my way to the rooftop terrace of my building. The city stretched out below, glittering with lights, each window holding untold stories. I felt a profound sense of connection, as though every individual struggle and triumph mirrored my own. Sitting there, I allowed myself to dream. Big, bold dreams that I had once thought impossible. Etten into tree in silence. On Taglit Turai Hilliers Neganeschen Astratsubzubelwan to Gowan World
Editorial Entile.
Freedom begins the moment. You stop waiting for someone else to care. Night fell and I returned inside, a notebook brimming with ideas and plans beside me. For the first time in years, I did not feel the sting of emptiness or the pull of old regrets. Instead, I felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense that I was reclaiming the narrative of my life, one deliberate choice at a time. Ant, Rito. Before going to bed, I looked out the window, watching the stars wink faintly above. There was no need to rush, no need to dwell on what had been lost. I had stepped into a new chapter, armed with clarity, resilience, and a commitment to myself. Tomorrow and every day after belonged entirely to me. The next morning, I woke with a sense of resolution I hadn't felt in years. The lingering shadows of the past had finally loosened their grip, and I could breathe freely for the first time in what felt like an eternity. I stretched, listening to the quiet hum of the city below, and smiled faintly at the thought of what lay ahead. Cut to B-roll, sunlight spilling into bedroom, city streets waking up. I made myself a cup of coffee, savoring the aroma and the warmth that seeped into my hands. It was a small ritual, but today it felt symbolic, a way to ground myself in the present. For too long, I had been chasing someone else's story, trying to find meaning in their choices and desires. Now, I realized the story that mattered most was my own. Mas 41. By late morning, I set out with a clear purpose. I visited the small studio space I had been saving for months, unpacking materials, setting up equipment, and beginning the project I had postponed for so long. Every action, from arranging the furniture to sketching out initial ideas, felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity that had been dormant. Cut to B-roll. Hands arranging papers, tools on a desk. In the afternoon, I received a message from an old acquaintance. We spoke for hours, sharing laughter, reflections, and even a few tears. It was comforting to connect without expectation or pretense, to experience genuine human interaction free from past entanglements. In that conversation, I recognized the value of relationships built on honesty and mutual respect, not on longing or obligation. Insurance.
Any credit shall remain, quod convistium.
As dusk fell, I climbed the hill near my apartment, watching the sky bleed shades of pink, orange, and purple. The wind carried the scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass, and I felt a serene sense of closure. Every memory of the heartbreak, the waiting, the unreciprocated love, all of it now seemed like preparation, a necessary storm to bring me to this calm, reflective moment. It m'oblige, es break, cheek, ist, isnfimit, des break de wind. I opened my notebook, now filled with sketches, plans, and dreams, and read through every page. Each idea, each word, felt imbued with a sense of possibility. The weight of the past no longer held me down. Instead, it served as a foundation upon which I could build something meaningful, authentic, and entirely my own.
There was dequast on the time Drefdotten.
Later that evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, reflecting on how far I had come. I had learned the hardest lesson of all, that love, no matter how passionate or enduring, cannot be forced, and sometimes the most profound act of courage is letting go. Sometimes, the bravest love is the one you set free. Finally, as night enveloped the city, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to drift into a peaceful sleep. Tomorrow, I would wake to continue this new chapter, confident, resilient, and wholly in control of my destiny. The past had shaped me, but it did not define me. I was ready to live fully, to embrace joy, creativity, and freedom on my own terms. Mexicantal ist so much uniformer. Das stands by Hirku. And in that quiet moment, I realized, letting go was not an ending. It was the beginning of everything I had been waiting for.